Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts.
You are invited to join the ghosts, the banshees, the fairies, and demons run amok, who are all coming to Octoberpod's Halloween potluck. You'll enjoy this ghastly crew if your blood doesn't end up in the stew. We'll be baking a cake and raising some hell. Beware, for heaven's sake, because we've got ghost stories to tell at Octoberpod's Halloween potluck. Coming to YouTube on Tuesday, October 11th. Get a special preview by listening to our companion podcast, Octoberpod AM, wherever you listen to podcasts. Or find all our links at octoberpodvhs.com. Octoberpod, retro horror for bold individualists.
Hiya! My disclaimer is simply this. I use swear words. Can't trust people who don't occasionally. And this show, it's about true crime, including murder, sexual assault, violence, and other gruesome acts. Listen at your own discretion. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors! Welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. It's been raining a little here on the coast of Oregon. It's actually been really kind of enjoyable. I'm hoping it will turn my front yard from brown to green again. CJ, why don't you just water? Because, Warriors, water here is super expensive for some reason. So I have to save it for the necessities in life, like showering, laundry, and dishes mostly. My electricity bill isn't too bad, and the garbage pickup is pretty inexpensive compared to other places I've lived. Although Hawaii's garbage pickup was the cheapest, because they didn't have any. We had to throw our garbage in my truck and take weekly trips to the dump. It was a free dump, though. And the oddest thing about the dump, and you might say, ew, yuck, but you could take clean containers and fill them with spring water there. They had 4 different spigots of clean, fresh spring water, and that was also free. They just wanted you to do the work, which was fine with me. But just out of curiosity, Warriors, what's the highest bill where you live? Let me know. You can reach me on Facebook as Beyond the Rainbow Podcast, and just about everywhere else as Rainbow Crimes. For those who might be inclined to want to help support this one-woman research, written, recorded, edited, and produced show, 'cause I freaking sparkle, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account for a one-time donation. And I love coffee. I also have a Patreon account. And at the $5 unicorn tier, I will name a unicorn at my Seabreeze Studio stables in your honor. At the end of each month, we take our unicorns out for a ride as I tell you another LGBTQ case, one that I've not covered yet on the show. Plus, all your episodes are early release and ad-free. I'll leave links to both in my show notes. I hope to meet some Rainbow Warriors at the Pacific Northwest True Crime Festival in Auburn, Washington on October 8th and 9th. It'll be at the Green River College, Maine, Auburn campus. The festival time is from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'm pretty sure food vendors will be available as well. If you do go and find the area that the True Crime Podcaster booths are in, I'm in booth number 2, right next to Murder News. I look forward to seeing you. With that, let's get into our case. The thought of going to a camp to experience South African wildlife can be exhilarating for many. So many of us love animals, and to see wild animals in their wild habitat, it'd be like a dream. It'd also be a little scary, but exciting all at the same time. In a 4-year time period, 3 sets of parents thought that they were sending their sons away to a camp that would teach them how to be wildlife park rangers. get them some experience in the great outdoors, gather them some direction in life, bond with other young men their age to develop the skills they would need to become productive young men in society. However, this camp was hiding behind a mask. The mask invited fun and adventure for those who attended. What the parents didn't count on was the camp personnel beating and eventually killing their sons. Because when that mask came off, this camp was a paramilitary training camp and a gay conversion camp. Echo Wild Game Rangers Camp was a place so militant they'd happily beat the gay out of your boy if they believed him effeminate in any way. We Rainbow Warriors have news for them. You can't pray the gay away, and while you can beat the life out of someone, you sure as fuck can't beat the gay out of someone. I need to preface this story to say that there is no definitive proof that any of these 3 boys were even gay. It was all alleged by the camp leaders. The boys were beaten because the owner of the camp and several of his employees felt that these boys were too feminine in stature and how they carried themselves, so they must be gay, right? Showing emotions and having feelings is considered to be a feminine trait. Maybe a walk or a body mannerism or a voice too soft or high-pitched might alert the camp personnel that a boy could be gay. But gay in the camp's opinion, not because of the boy's admissions or actions of being homosexual. The camp's motto simply boasted,
"We will make boys into men."
18-year-old Eric Calitz was described as a miracle baby by his family. He was born 3 months premature, and he died in an incubator, only to be brought back to life. He was a miracle baby, but because of it, he did suffer some mild brain damage, which caused him to be very immature mentally, and he was naive. Eric was a good kid, though. He just had trouble keeping a job. The only work he could ever find was security-type jobs, and that only paid 1,500 Rand a month, or about 97 American dollars. That breaks down to only about $25 a week, which is squat for an 18-year-old or anyone to have to live and support himself. The year was 2007. Eric was lured unknowingly by his brother Brian to join Echo Wild Game Rangers Camp. Brian worked for the organization, and Brian didn't realize what the camp was really about. So he told Eric that he'd learn new skills, and when he completed his time at camp, he could become a wildlife ranger and make more money. But first, Eric would have to pay 22,000 Rand, or roughly $1,500 as an entrance fee to go to this camp. I guess there were no family discounts. But since we know that Eric only made $25 a week, he didn't have that kind of money. What he ended up doing is he signed a contract to work off the debt at the camp. He had to stay at the camp for 2 years in order to get it all paid for. Sadly, Eric would not live 2 more years. As soon as Eric reported to the camp, his cell phone was confiscated. He would no longer have any connection to the outside world. Within a couple of days, Eric asked if he could leave the camp and go back home. He did not like it there. The owner of the camp screamed in Eric's face,
"You're not a Moffy, be a man!"
And just to clear it up, a Moffy is South African of our derogatory word faggot. From here until the day Eric died, he would endure rigorous military training, not the type to become a ranger, but the type to become a conservative, right-wing paramilitary soldier. Eric was ridiculed, berated, beaten, food and water was withheld, and Eric would die within a couple of weeks because the owner of the camp, 43-year-old Alex DeCoker, wanted to make a man out of him. Also culpable in the beatings and torture was an employee of DeCoker's, 22-year-old Michael Aramis. And just where was Eric's brother Brian during all of this? That's a really good question, Rainbow Warriors. One that I unfortunately don't have the answer to. I can tell you the following day after Eric's death, His family back home received a text message saying that Eric had died from a heart attack. A week or so later, the camp told the family that Eric had a seizure and was in a coma. Then the next story came days later. The story was that Eric had passed away due to dehydration. Eventually, the true story was exposed. Eric had died from excessive bleeding on his brain due to head trauma. First of all, don't fucking text a family that their loved one is dead. That type of news deserves a face-to-face visit. You preach about being a man. Well, Alex DeCoker, owner of Echo Wild Game Rangers, why don't you fucking man up and show your face with this news, you cowardly shit? Secondly, get your damn story straight. How did Eric die? Another boy, 19-year-old Nicholas Vanderwalt, was also murdered at Ranger Camp. He too was abused, tortured, starved, and beaten to death. But there's not a whole lot of information available about Nicholas, I'm afraid. It seems his murder in 2007 was swept under the rug, pretty much the same way Eric Callitz's was. It seems like the personnel at Echo Wildlife Game Rangers Camp may have got their shit together for the next 4 years. But then it happened. The third victim, murdered by the owner and his employees, occurred 4 years later in 2011. He was a 15-year-old boy named Raymond Byes. He was an unwilling attendant of the Echo Ranger Camp, but his parents thought it would be a good experience for him, so he went along with it. Was Raymond a problem child? No. He got in trouble at school sometimes, but that was because he was diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He struggled with focus and keeping his body calm at school. Raymond was a slender boy, almost 6 foot tall, big blue eyes, tow-headed blonde hair. He was in excellent health when he arrived with his folks at the Echo Wild Game Rangers camp. Raymond looked uncertainly at the gates, and then he gave his mom a final hug goodbye before embarking on what was supposed to be a 3-month training camp. Raymond walked through the gates, not knowing he would never walk out of those gates again under his own power. Pretty much from the moment Raymond entered the camp, employees didn't like him. They said he had an attitude and was a braggart. Truth was, Raymond's slight build made him seem more effeminate to the camp employees. His ADHD symptoms were showing as well, making him prone to being inattentive, hyper, and impulsive. The camp employees did not understand hyperactivity or how to deal with it, and they took Raymond's innocent behavior as misbehavior. These same employees wasted no time starting the torture of Raymond. Day in and day out, Raymond lost his eating privileges. Raymond was not allowed fluids, not even water. A person can live 8 to 21 days without food and water, but eventually, that person's vital organs start to shut down. Raymond was chained to his bed. The camp said the reason he was chained to his bed because he tried to take his own life. Raymond was made to eat powdered soap and his own feces because Raymond would have bathroom accidents from not being allowed to use the bathroom facilities. He was electrocuted, beaten with wooden planks, beaten with rubber hoses and sticks. After 10 weeks of this abuse, Raymond could barely move, let alone walk or stand. He was removed from the camp on a gurney and taken to the hospital. While Raymond was slender before, his body was now completely emaciated. He was dehydrated and literally starving to death. He had brain damage, a broken arm, cigarette burns all over his body, signs of kidney failure, and he was in a coma. Heroic attempts by the hospital staff to keep Raymond alive didn't work. And 15-year-old Raymond died 4 weeks after being admitted to the hospital. To go from having a healthy son in January 2011 to having your child come out of a place that he was supposed to go to learn new skills just a few months later, and he is a skeleton of himself, and then to have your child die in April as a result of what was done to him in that camp you put him in. Those parents have to have a lifetime of guilt. I know I could never live with doing that to my child. Owner of the camp, Alex DeCoker, and his main henchman, Michael Aramis, they were finally arrested after the death of Raymond. At trial, DeCoker tried to paint himself as a caring camp counselor. He taped conversations he had with Raymond that tried to prove this. But DeCoker's son testified that all these recordings made were staged to try and mask the abuse. The magistrate addressed the court that the assaults on Raymond were premeditated, and his torture was systematic, and there were other deaths of boys that occurred at DeCoker's Echo Wild Game Ranger Camp as well. The magistrate also said, "You were the person in charge. You were the only person on that plot that could have put an end to these tragic incidents, but you didn't." At the end of the trial, the magistrate found DeCoker guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to 20 years for that. For child abuse, he was sentenced an additional 5 years, and for assault to do grievous bodily harm, he received another 2 years, making it 27 years in prison. His sentence for the death of Eric Kalitz was suspended, and he was found not guilty of murder in Nicholas Vanderwalt's case. All this really surprises me, and 27 years for what that evil man did is not nearly enough time. His employee, Michael Aramis, had his little delicate hand slapped. He was first sentenced to 12 years in prison, but for some reason that was suspended. And he received the very light sentence of 3 years of correctional supervision, which I believe to mean he pretty much walked out of there a free man. That's a fucking shame because he was complicit in beating Raymond, and most likely other boys at the camp. Rest in power, Eric, Nicholas, and Raymond.
I'm Edward October, creator-host of Octoberpod, and we're both listening to Beyond the Rainbow, Crimes of the LGBT on the Darkcast Network.
Our true crime quickie comes to us from Sacramento, California area, my former stomping grounds. The year 1999 was a tumultuous one for the Center High School teacher David Warfield. He had gender dysphoria, and he planned soon to go through with transitional surgery. The biggest mistake Mr. Warfield made was talking to his students in class about it. He wanted to be open and honest with everyone, so it wouldn't be a huge surprise when he came back to school in a whole different package. This act immediately got David Warfield fired from his teaching job. But David went through with the transitional steps towards becoming Dana Rivers. Dana would eventually sue the Antelope School District. They're the ones that fired her, and she'd win a settlement of $150,000 because of it. She told a Sacramento newspaper, "From as far back as I can remember, I felt different. I got Tonka trucks for Christmas and it just didn't feel right. I was socialized as a boy, but I didn't feel as though I belonged. One of our neighbors had a playhouse in the backyard, and I remember very clearly fighting to be the mother when we'd play house." Dana's story became national, if not globally newsworthy. Ironically, the settlement she received helped pay for her reassignment surgery. After her dismissal from teaching, Dana dedicated a good portion of her time to being a trans advocate. She was writing a book in 2001 about trans rights. Her wife she had when she was David left and divorced her. Dana had several girlfriends after that, and she labeled herself a lesbian, although she said she wouldn't be surprised if she married a man someday. I couldn't find too much documentation on what Dana was doing between 2001 and 2016, but come 2016 in mid-November, I know exactly where Dana was and what she was doing. November 2016. Oakland, California police and firefighters were called to a residence. Gunshots were heard in a neighboring house, and a fire had started in the garage of the home. As police and firefighters arrived to the home that they were dispatched to, they found a young man who had been stabbed laying on his front yard, and they started to tend to him. Suddenly, they heard a very loud noise coming from the garage, and then there was a woman at the door covered in blood. This was not that woman's home, and she attempted to flee on a motorcycle, and that motorcycle was not her motorcycle. The woman was 61-year-old Dana Rivers. As police detained her, they recovered a knife, a set of metal knuckles, and some bullets on her person. The young man laying on the front yard who had been stabbed was 19-year-old Benny Diambu Wright. Benny was bleeding out from a nasty stab wound. Rescue workers immediately started to work on Benny. Inside the home, they found 2 more victims. Both were women. Both were dead. They had died from fatal gunshots and stab wounds. The women were mothers to the young man who laid injured on the front lawn. They were 57-year-old Patricia Wright and her wife, 56-year-old Charlotte Reed. This was their house, their home, their lives, their motorcycle. Benny, who had been adopted by Patricia from West Africa, had lost too much blood, and he too died that night in front of his home. 2 other adult children survived the lesbian couple. Dana Rivers was arrested for the murders of the 3 residents of the home, and for arson as well as possession of weapons. And metal knuckles? Well, that's just illegal contraband altogether. While still to this day we really don't know the true motive Dana had for killing these people, investigators believe it had something to do with a property dispute. Dana apparently was familiar with the women she murdered. This is according to a surviving son who remembers meeting Dana when she was with his moms. Patricia Wright was a semi-retired teacher at Esperanza Elementary School. She taught computer classes to children. Her wife Charlotte owned a hair salon and was a veteran of the United States Air Force. Benny had graduated high school the year prior, and he was now attending college. He had aspirations to be a registered nurse. Benny wanted to help people. Dana was held at the Santa Rita jail without bail. She had no prior criminal record, not even in her life as David. We aren't sure what made her snap and take 3 lives. Aside from the speculated dispute over a property issue, which I've seen no further discussion of. I did, however, see Dana was a huge factor in Camp Trans. Camp Trans is a protest group comprised of trans people who protest the exclusion of trans women at the gates of Mitchfest. Mitchfest being a several-day music festival for lesbians in Michigan. From the very onset of this festival in the 1970s, Mitchfest leaders banned trans women from attending. To me, this is some J.K. Rowling bullshit. There's just too much ignorance still about trans people. Some of the thinking was trans women were men acting like women to have sex with lesbians. Ugh, okay. Us lesbians are good in the sack, but come on, really? Admittedly, years ago, this narrow-minded thinking was my way of thinking also. But I picked up a book or 2, did some research, and when I learned what gender dysphoria was, it was then I had a brain breakthrough. I understood and I even empathized with how hard suffering from gender dysphoria must be. And when I related it to the times of painful discomfort I've been in, and my pain was only temporary, I can't fathom living like that on a constant. I bring up the Mitchfest because I wonder if this could be what sparked Dana's fury at Patricia and Charlotte. Perhaps Patricia and Charlotte bought into the whole trans women aren't real women fallacy. I don't know. But if that were the case, they did not deserve to die over it. They needed to be educated. Dana was a teacher. She could have taught them about gender dysphoria. Ever since the triple murders took place, Dana's court trials and jail has been a shit show. Dana claimed she was not guilty by reasons of insanity. She's been in and out of mental health facilities. She's had trials only for them to be postponed countless number of times. And of course, 4 years after the murders, COVID came and saw tons of delays in our court systems, and even in hospital settings where Dana could not be treated for her mental issues. As Dana's courtroom trial still awaits, she will have a readiness hearing next month on October 6th. They're going to see if she is in the proper mental state and declared competent for trial. If she is declared competent, her murder trial will begin October 10th. It's been 6 years since she murdered the family in Oakland, California. Hopefully soon there'll be some justice for our 3 victims. Rest in power, Patricia, Charlotte, and Benny. Remember, it's not a crime to live your truth, unless you're a murderer.